Hey y'all, our next section of notes that we're going to be talking about is something else that was taking place during the 1930s, and that is the Dust Bowl. So the Dust Bowl is also happening during the Great Depression, and we'll talk more here in a moment about what exactly that was, but we'll also talk about some of what was going on during the Great Depression after the stock market crash, which we already talked about. So one thing that happens once the Great Depression begins is we have something called the bonus army. Now, if y'all remember, World War I ended the end of the 19 teens in 1918. So it's been a little over a decade when the stock market crashes in 1929. But the veterans who had fought in World War I were promised a bonus for their service in the U.S. military during World War I. So when the Great Depression begins, a lot of those veterans are in need of money. So they're going to basically go to a big Hooverville, which was on the Washington Mall in Washington, D.C., which is the big grass area where all the monuments and everything are, and where the White House is, and the Capitol building is, and all of that in Washington, D.C. And they're basically just going to camp out in that Hooverville demanding for their bonus from President Hoover. Now, even though this bonus wasn't due until a little bit later, the veterans are in need of money, so they're demanding this bonus. But Hoover is going to refuse to provide this bonus to these veterans. Now, that already doesn't look very good on Hoover because he's got these homeless veterans that are asking for the bonus that they were promised. Now they are asking for it early, but still just kind of thinking about the press of it. Hoover's refusing to give this bonus to these veterans, and instead he's actually going to order for this Hooverville to be burnt to the ground and for the veterans to be sent away, which you can see from this image here is what it looked like when that happened. So he sent the DC police to basically get people out of the Hooverville, which as far as, again, the press of that goes, the idea of bunch of veterans asking for the bonus they had been promised to help themselves out financially, and the president sending the police to basically shoo them away doesn't look very good. And you can actually see in this image here that the police officers are trying to pull this flag away from the veterans. And that's definitely one image of this event that a lot of people see, and it doesn't really look very good on Hoover. Now, as far as things go, as the Depression continues from 1929 into the 1930s, we see that it's not changing. The economy is not recovering on its own. Hoover is eventually going to start to change his policies. Now, with these policy changes, we will see that the big things that he's doing are just having big projects. So he's not going to propose anything or agree to anything that's helping out individual citizens, but rather having big projects created to help sort of revitalize the economy. He does reestablish the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, which is meant to kind of help out our country's economy to rebuild now that the Depression has begun. But then he's also going to launch the building of the Hoover Dam, which is the Hoover Dam is in Nevada and is a hydroelectric power plant that actually powers much of Las Vegas today. But the idea behind this dam was it would provide jobs to thousands of people as they were constructing this dam. But that was only a short-term project. So again, this wasn't something that was going to help out individuals long term. It was a big project that was only going to last for a short amount of time. And even though he does start doing these things in 1932, he kind of already has messed up, and it's already been 3 years of the Depression. People feel like they can't really rely on him to help revitalize the economy long term. And 1932, also a presidential election year. Now, as far as the Dust Bowl goes, the Dust Bowl is going to be a severe drought that was happening on the Great Plains in the 1930s. And with this drought, mainly because of the farming techniques that were being done, because they're just growing the same crop over and over and over again, it depletes the soil of a lot of nutrients. So it's very easy for the soil to get really loose, and as wind blows across the plains, it kicks up that loose soil, and causes massive dust storms. And these dust storms are really going to harm the agriculture of the plains. Now you can see from this image here that these storms were massive. This wasn't just like a little bit of dust getting kicked up and you might have to cover your face. This was you're hiding in a house, hopefully can find some shelter, and you're staying put for as long as you need to try to avoid this storm. And cattle are actually going to be killed in very large numbers all along the plains from these dust storms, from breathing in the dust as it's getting blown across the plains. Which, if you remember, at the end of the 1800s, really the main ways that people are making money is either growing crops or raising cattle. So the crops definitely are going to suffer from these dust storms, but the cattle as well. So overall, the economy on the Great Plains is not doing very great during the 1930s either. Now, because of the Dust Bowl and from these massive dust storms coming across the plains, a lot of people are going to migrate off of the plains. They're going to move further west to places like California. And this mass migration that's happening is going to spark some interest from different individuals. John Steinbeck is going to write the book, The Grapes of Wrath, on this migration. Some of y'all maybe have had to read his book of Mice and Men in your English classes, but this is another very well-known book of his. And then the photographer, Dorothea Lange, is going to actually go and take pictures of people that are migrating because of the Dust Bowl as well. And here's some images. There's the cover of The Grapes of Wrath, and then probably the most well-known image from Dorothea Lange of people migrating because of the Dust Bowl. This mother with their children basically having lost everything, having to pick up what they have left and just move further out west. So sort of interestingly, it's almost like the migrations that were happening 80 years earlier when people were traveling along the Oregon Trail are sort of happening again, but now it's happening not because people are seeking new opportunity, but because what they did have on the plains has been destroyed by the Dust Bowl. So we already know the economy in our big cities and our stock market is in shambles after the stock market crash in 1929, then leading into the 30s, and then on the plains as well. Our agricultural economy is also not doing too well either. So the 1930s, definitely a rough decade for the country so far. In our next video, we'll talk a little bit about what is going to change in 1932 to help try to bring the country out of this.